Hello all. Okay, so today I'm making a dish that I've never made before. I've thought about it, I've done slight research on it, and we're just gonna go from there. So I found some pretty nice steaks yesterday, went out and thought what goes really nice with steak. Well, not my favorite, but scalloped potatoes. So yeah, it sounds easy enough. But we're going to figure this out together, right? Because even if we make a mistake or several, that's the joys of cooking. So I've sliced my potatoes pretty thin, but enough that they're going to have some crunch to them. About a ½ inch to an inch thick. And I've lightly greased my baked dish here. So I'm going to line these, and in between them I've cut up some shallots, and I'm going to put some shallots in between, and then we're going to go to the stovetop to figure out a sauce together. Okay, so I've got my first layer down. I'm only doing one layer at a time because I kind of want to do my cheese sauce in between the layers here. It feels like that makes sense to me. I've seen a bunch of different ways and a bunch of different styles of doing it. I guess as long as it tastes good. Okay. So in my saucepan here, I've got about 2 tablespoons of salted butter that I am going to melt, and once that's done, I'm going to add about a tablespoon and a half of flour. I'm going to make a roux and cook it out. So making a roux is making a paste. It's going to be the thickening agent for the sauce. Now the cheese will help, but this will make sure it's really rich and creamy. You can use cornstarch if you don't have flour, especially right now, hard to come by, so hold tight. Oh, and I'm gonna season the potatoes there with just some pepper, not so much the salt, because the salt is gonna be in all the cheese, and I'm gonna use a touch of parm. I'm Italian, why not? So I'm gonna pepper the potatoes, and we're gonna come back. Okay, so I've added in my 2 tablespoons of flour. As you can see, it's turning a nice golden brown. That's what I want to happen. I want to cook out the flour. I don't want it to be pasty in terms of the way it's going to feel on your palate and taste. So I'm just going to lower that right down. You can use milk or cream. I've got cream, so bear with me. Okay, so I've got about a ½ liter of cream. I will add milk to this, but I had cream that I needed to use before I could no longer use it. And the reason I'm using this kind of saucepan here is because, let's turn you back up, I'm going to use a whisk, and I didn't want to scratch the bottoms of the pans that I already had. So I'm going to bring this back up to a low simmer and add some milk. Okay, so I've added in about a ½ liter of cream. I use 10%. You can use whatever you want. If I had my preference, I would have fat-free, but I didn't. And then I added about a cup of 2% milk, and I'm just whisking it away, just trying to blend in all of the roux, so it's looking good. And the cheese, once we add that in, that will completely help to thicken everything and make it one lovely sauce. So I'm going to baby this and stirring on and off occasionally for about the next 5 minutes, and we'll come back and look at the viscosity of it at that point. Okay, so it's getting thick, but the cheese is really going to help that out now, so I'm going to turn it down low so that I can properly melt my cheese. I'm going to go and add cheese a little bit at a time so I don't have this huge massive clump in there. I want it to melt evenly. So I'm going to go ahead and add probably about a ½ cup each time. I've grated 2 cups and I did sprinkle just the tiniest little bit in between the layers. So I'm going to go aiming a 1 3/4 cups in the cheese sauce with probably about 3 to 4 teaspoons of parm. So I'm going to get the first ½ cup in, and we'll see it in a bit. So I've only added a ½ cup, and already you can see the thickness and how much that has thickened with a half a cup. I've reduced the heat right down to low, and we're going to add in the next half a cup. Also, I'm using marble because that's what I had, but I feel like old cheddar would really be good here. We're just gonna really, well, that was probably 3/4 of a cup, but okay. So we're just and the color is starting to change as well. So we're really going to whisk this in because I don't want it clumpy, right? I want a very smooth sauce. That's looking really good. Okay, so I'm going to keep doing this for another 30 seconds, add in the next batch, and when I'm ready to add in the parm, we'll come back. Okay, so I've added 4 generous teaspoons of parm, and I'm going to whisk that all in. You can see the thickness has really thickened. Okay, so it's nice and thick. I've added in a generous amount, about a teaspoon of black pepper. Just gonna give that a taste. Yep, that's cheesy. Very yummy. Alright, so just going to finalize. I think it needs a touch of salt. So I'm going to sprinkle in some salt and then we'll come back. Okay, so I'm going to ladle in the cheese sauce now. I'm going to make sure that I coat everything, but keeping in mind I'm going to be doing another layer. So I'm going to be using about half of this pot. Right, because this is what the potatoes are ultimately going to be cooking in. And in the meantime, I have preheated my oven to 385 degrees, and I'm going to cook this with the lid on for about 35 to 40 minutes, and then with the lid off for probably about 10 to 15. Okay, so now I'm going to work fast to do the other layer, and we'll see you in a sec. Side note, I can totally see why people buy these in the boxes. Yep, I sure can. Okay, so my mixture had cooled down completely and it had solidified. So to it, because I also wanted to make sure that the potatoes are completely cooked through, some of mine were thicker than I probably should have cut them. I added a half a cup of chicken stock. I put it back on the stove to kind of get it warmed through. Yeah, my hands are terrible. That's not going to work. And so it's going to be much more liquidy than the last one, not by much, but it's going to completely cook through. So I'm just going to pour it over all of the potatoes. I had surgery on my hand a few years ago, and sometimes she still just doesn't want to cooperate with me. And I'm going to make sure that I get in all the nooks and crannies, and it's literally just going to boil right into the potatoes, and it's going to make them lovely. So don't worry if it looks a little soupy, it will totally cook off. This is just going to ensure that they are completely cooked. To that top, I'm going to add the rest of the cheese, and it's just tiny little sprinkles, right? Because it's gonna bake right on in. And I did add the rest of my shallots, and I added a sprinkling of pepper. I'm gonna cover this now, and again, it's gonna go for about 35, more likely like 45 minutes, because again, my potatoes were slightly too thick. It's alright, it's the joys of cooking, right? When you make a mistake, you learn how to make it better the next time. And 45 minutes at 385 degrees. I'm going to take off the lid and probably let it go another 15 minutes until the top is all bubbly, and we'll show you pictures then.